Hello! We're going to go over commissions and how I go through the process and hopefully give others some insight into the whole deal. First off, a commission in this context is any piece of art done for somebody else, usually with some form of compensation. But before you decide to take on the path of, commissions, you need to understand your own preferences and ask yourself what kind of work that you will and will not do. That way you can be clear with prospective clients and set expectations early on. Next, you will need to establish a means of communication. I recommend using a standardized form in order to create clear expectations and to establish a tone for ongoing communications. You are a professional and people should feel like you've given this some consideration. You can see an example here on the screen, but I will post a link in the description so you can investigate my form on its own, including all of the questions, the bubbles that I use, and the quotes that I have for pricing. Once someone has completed the form, it'll send you an email confirmation. This is assuming that you're using Google Forms, which is something that I very much recommend. I do think that responding within 24 hours is going to be the best baseline, as it does establish an expectation for prompt communication. Read what your prospective client has placed within the form itself. Make sure that you're examining any reference photos that they've put together for you. Most of the time that does take quite a bit of effort for someone who's may not be used to that sort of thing. You'll also want to start building out your information page. That way you can communicate any questions or clarifications with your prospective clients. I have included a redacted copy of the email that I used here, and I'll give it just a couple of moments so you can see exactly how that went along. You may need to pause. In this email, we've also established a quote for pricing. Now, once you have done that, you've established the baseline, you're at the stage now where you need to actually send an invoice. I personally use PayPal and recommend that's what you should probably use unless you have some other third-party software that is trustworthy. PayPal has an option to send invoices directly to your clients. With any emails that they've got through the form process, you'll be able to send them an invoice directly, and with that, you'll also be able to specify your deposit, whether or not it can be paid in part or in full, and if you have a tip. I've highlighted an image here to show if you go to the payment options beneath the total, you can actually use the allow partial payment. That's about as close to a deposit as you're going to get, as far as I can tell anyways. Now, once you have gotten a deposit, whether you have that set to 25%, 50%, however you decide to go about it, it is time to make sure that you're putting in the work for the baseline. You want to make sure that you have got sketches out there so that your client knows exactly what to expect. In this case, I did 4 different sketches and labeled them A, B, C, and D, and then sent copies of those sketches to my client by the same email that they had initially set up the form. They came back telling me that they liked one in particular, and that's where I put all of my effort in. No one really wants to put hours and hours of work into something only to find that there was a difference of opinion. So make sure that you're getting feedback at each stage of the operation. That way you don't have to worry about needing to undo many hours of work. And once you do know which sketch that your client likes, it's time to lean into colors and details. Try to keep things in big picture for now, because once you've got most of the foundation in place and the image is really coming together, you want to send that rough draft over to the client to ensure that you're still on the same page. In my case for this commission, it turned out that they wanted a much darker color palette than I had selected, and a different type of instrument than they'd used as a reference. I could have gone into the polish phase and spent hours on what I would eventually need to swap out, so don't skip the follow-up process. Once you've got feedback, you go into the polish phase. Now, this is where you're trying to balance detail work with time spent. Do the best work you can, but also respect the time and price point that you're working with, and the deadlines that you've set. The final draft should be sent for any last minute corrections. And at this phase, if there's any wildly different change that your client is requesting, you should be comfortable negotiating a higher price, as basically everything up to this point should have been ironed out by now, save for small details. Once given the all clear, make sure the client knows that a full PNG will be provided once the invoice has been paid in full, not before. Everything you sent before this should have been screenshots or JPEGs. A full high quality PNG should not be sent before payment is received. Sadly, some people will cut and run and you may not see the rest of the invoice. Finally, using Google Dropbox, you can send a large full file to somebody. Since the PNG is usually going to be pretty sizable, it doesn't fit in normal emails most of the time. And important, make sure you thank your client and welcome them back for another time. I hope that you found this interesting and insightful. Please let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you later.